Okay, in this one we're just going to go over Adobe Media Encoder. There are two things that you're going to want to keep in mind here, and the two biggest things are where am I putting my files and how am I coding them. Oh, and I guess there's three things, because the other big thing that I see a lot of people doing when they mess up is they put in the wrong width and height of, or the aspect ratio of their video. Today, you know, with HD, if you're shooting with 1080p, the width will be 1920 and the height will be 1080. But people often don't know that. Before we get started with Adobe Media Encoder, which, you know, by the way, it works a lot like Compressor, you'll want to set up a directory. And the way you do that is you first go into Preferences. And I've made a folder on the desktop already. And I believe, or have I? No, I haven't. But I will go ahead and do that right now. Shift Command N will make a new folder. And bring that over here. And let's just call that something, I don't know. Who knows what we'll call that? Project X. The thing you're going to want to keep in mind is when you open up that preference window, you select this little radio button, specify output file destination. Then you're going to want to browse. And I'm going to find that on my desktop where I made that. And there it is, Project X, and I'm going to choose that and then hit OK. And now all I have to do is, if I have some QuickTime movies or whatever, I mean generally before I have big projects that where I'm using multiple formats, I'll try to keep all my formats the same and sort of process them before I even start cutting anything. So up here you click on the yellow indicator right here. By the way, you can drag and drop it, or you can hit the add button. And you can actually hit or add multiple files. I'm not going to do that. So I can drag a couple of them over there. And you can see already that it's going directly to my Project X folder that I made. Now the other cool thing is if I change one of these formats in here, I'm going to go up here. I'm going to change my format. I like to use an MPEG-2 with this Adobe Media Encoder. Many people like to use the QuickTime movie. Pretty much either one of those is a broadcast standard, so I'm going to stick with the MPEG-2. The other thing that I like to make sure is that if I've shot in progressive scan as opposed to interlace, that I'm using 1080p 2997. I tend to just use that because that's the 29 frames a second is the North American sort of standard. Go ahead and click on that, and if I want to, I can rename this. You know, I don't know, scene 1, 2, something like that. The other cool thing is down at the bottom here, if I wanted to, I could mark my in and out points and drag those over. The other thing is I could just set them using that. You can also use the I or O on your keyboard. If you're done, you hit OK. And now I can do that to several of these clips if I want to by holding down the Shift key. And it's going to ask me, do I want to do that to several of them? And I'm going to say yes. Now, the thing to keep in mind again is right here. You tend to get people tend to get in trouble because they don't look at the preset, and they'll just they'll hit the 24 frames, or they'll, you know. And I've just hit it's HD TV 720, but you'll notice that now my width and height are not, you know, my 1080p. It's actually smaller. So I'm going to select that, hit OK, and you'll see that it will change it, still maintain the file directory. Now I'm going to hit play. And there's the status bar, and it will go through each one of those as a batch, which I find handy. Media with the P2 cards, you can use that as well. So that's that. You can also, if you want to, you can pause it if it's taking up time, and that sort of thing. One last note about Media Encoder, which this is my favorite thing about this, is let's say, for example, I have a Premiere file that I want to do the sequence for. I never do my compression in Premiere or in After Effects. I do all my compression in the Media Encoder. And the great thing about this is I can actually take my project file and drag it in, and it will use this dynamic, oh, when you hear that sound, it means it's done. It uses this dynamic link server, and it will ask you, which sequence do you want to compress after a while, and that's the same again for After Effects and for Premiere. So I'll select this sequence, hit OK. My directory is the same. I have this that I need to change. My media is offline because I don't actually have anything in that sequence. But if I did, I would just, make sure the settings line up correctly, and I'm good to go. And that's Adobe Media Encoder.